In the mid-1800s, while the rest of the American frontier was carving out narrow, winding paths for horses and foot traffic, a small group of pioneers in the high desert of the Great Basin were executing a geometric experiment of massive scale. They laid out a grid of 135 blocks, each measuring 660 feet per side, separated by roads far wider than those found in older American cities like Manhattan or San Francisco. Local legend holds that these streets were built with enough room for a team of 8 oxen and a covered wagon to make a full U-turn without the driver needing to curse. Today, this abundance of space has transformed Salt Lake City into the most unconventional urban layout in America. The massive grid allows for modern light rail systems and sprawling linear parks that other cities simply do not have the physical room to accommodate. Yet it also creates a walking experience where a single block feels like an exhausting journey. So how did a 19th century religious blueprint create a city that is both a pedestrian's nightmare and a transit planner's dream? While most American cities grew organically, or according to whatever real estate speculators wanted, Salt Lake City was pre-planned as a monument to order. In the 1830s, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, envisioned a community system that would eventually spread across the entire world. His Plat of Zion was the architectural blueprint for that vision. Smith's original design called for 10-acre blocks with houses set back 25 feet from the street. When Brigham Young arrived in the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, he implemented the plan with even greater ambition, expanding the streets further, allowing for exceptionally wide sidewalks on both sides. This was an organization of space intended to keep the temple as the symbolic focal point of the city. This religious dedication to mathematical precision created a city defined by its cardinal orientation. While other cities struggled with the chaotic expansion of the Industrial Revolution, Salt Lake City remained a rigid geometric island in the desert. This left Salt Lake City with physical infrastructure that is the exact opposite of its East Coast counterparts. In cities like Boston or Philadelphia, streets are fixed containers where utilities, sidewalks, and traffic must be stacked vertically or squeezed into impossibly tight corridors. In Salt Lake City, the streets make up roughly 1/3 of the city's land area. That means there is an almost absurd amount of underutilized asphalt just sitting there. For decades, urbanists looked at all that empty space and saw it as a liability. Residents complained that crossing a 6-lane road just to grab coffee created a psychological barrier that killed any desire to walk. So, Salt Lake City spent most of the 20th century looking like an urban planning mistake. A city with streets so wide they created deserts between buildings. But what no one foresaw was that this absurd amount of space would eventually become the city's greatest asset. To understand what makes Salt Lake City work differently, you have to understand why the scale feels so wrong on foot. One block in Salt Lake City covers roughly the same area as multiple Portland blocks. In Portland, blocks are only 200 feet long, which creates a high density of intersections. Those frequent intersections naturally slow down vehicle traffic because drivers have to stop, look, and turn constantly. In Salt Lake City, the standard is 8 blocks per mile. That means pedestrians face long, uninterrupted stretches of sidewalk where cars are encouraged by the sheer width of the pavement to drive fast. Someone walking downtown hikes across vast expanses of asphalt, exposed to weather, waiting at intersections that feel designed for only cars. Studies in traffic safety have repeatedly shown that wider lanes often encourage higher speeds and correlate with higher crash severity. In fact, for roads where the speed limit sits between 30 and 35 miles per hour, wider lanes showed significantly higher crash numbers than 9-foot lanes. For a city like Salt Lake, this research suggests that all that extra width is actively dangerous for pedestrians. This creates the central paradox of Salt Lake City's design. The streets are so wide that they kill the street-level intimacy that makes urban life feel vibrant. The social energy that comes from density gets diluted across 10-acre blocks. Even successful developments like City Creek Center have to use sky bridges to connect their sections across the massive roads. Urban designers often talk about something called agglomeration economies, where businesses cluster together to create energy and foot traffic. In Salt Lake City, the spread-out nature of the grid has historically prevented the formation of dense entertainment districts. Everything is too far apart for spontaneous wandering, too exposed for comfortable lingering. The city was built with wagons in mind, not the casual interactions that make neighborhoods feel alive. But modern cities need infrastructure that simply does not fit in traditional street grids. And Salt Lake City has something that no other major American metro has in abundance. Because the rights of way are so generous, Salt Lake City was able to integrate its tracks light rail system with relatively little disruption to existing structures. While other metros must fight for every inch of rail path, often tearing down buildings or rerouting entire blocks, Salt Lake's wide corridors simply absorbed the trains. The city built high-frequency rail loops that encircled the downtown area with far less demolition than comparable systems in other cities. The space was already there, waiting for over a century to be filled. This was not the first time Salt Lake streets adapted to new technology. In the early 1900s, the city had an extensive streetcar network that was easily accommodated by the wide medians. By 1923, Salt Lake had over 143 miles of track, making streetcars a daily mode of transportation for a large portion of the population. When the automobile became dominant after World War II, the city transitioned again. It paved over the old trolley lines and turned medians into parking lots. The flexibility of the grid allowed Salt Lake to become a car-centric city without needing to demolish and rebuild. Now we are witnessing the third great transition. Salt Lake City is currently working on a project called the Green Loop. The plan is to transform 5 miles of oversized rights-of-way into a connected circuit of linear parks and premier bikeways. By reconfiguring just 4 major street corridors, the city can triple its downtown park acreage without purchasing a single new property. This is a move that is physically impossible for almost any other major American city. While other urban centers must spend millions acquiring tiny parcels to squeeze in pocket parks, Salt Lake City is simply converting its excess asphalt into an urban forest. The Green Loop is designed to reduce the urban heat island effect, manage stormwater through planted biofilters, and provide a front yard for a downtown population that is expected to double in the coming years. The same streets that once symbolized religious isolation are now the very tools the city is using to reconnect its neighborhoods. The 40-foot sidewalks that felt like wasteland are becoming tree-lined corridors where protected bike lanes can be wide enough for snowplows to navigate in winter. But there is a hidden cost to all this transformation. Unlike East Coast cities where space constraints forced utilities to be stacked vertically in tight bundles, the wide streets of Salt Lake allowed for unconstrained horizontal placement. Gas lines, power conduits, fiber optic cables, everything was laid across the entire right-of-way without any need for space-saving precision. Nobody worried about where things went because there was always more room. Now, as the city tries to plant the urban forest promised by the Green Loop, they are faced with a maze of infrastructure that was never mapped with any rigor. Moving these utilities will be the single most expensive part of modernizing the streets. It is a cost that remains hidden from public view, but represents millions of dollars for every block of renovation. Despite the expense, the city remains committed because the potential rewards are enormous. The Green Loop project aims to increase the number of trees per block by up to 1,000%. Projections suggest surface temperatures could drop by as much as 15 degrees. For a city sitting in a high desert valley where summer heat can be brutal, that difference changes how livable the streets feel. The religious motivations that created the layout have faded into history, but the physical container that vision created remains effectively irreversible. You cannot change the width of streets or the size of blocks without demolishing everything and starting over. What that means for someone living in Salt Lake City is that their daily life is still dictated by a map drawn nearly 200 years ago. The city is currently experiencing what officials call an unprecedented level of development, with cranes dominating the skyline and thousands of new residential units being built to fill the gaps in the grid. As the population grows, the pressure to make the city more compact and walkable is increasing. The question then becomes whether the grid can evolve to support that density without losing the advantages that the wide streets provide. Salt Lake City is a place of paradoxes. Its streets are among the widest streets of any major American city, but it also has some of the most intimate hidden alleys where local businesses cluster. It was founded on a vision of Zion as a place set apart, but it is now working to integrate itself into the modern world through transit connections and sustainable infrastructure. While every other American city tries to figure out how to find more room for bike lanes, light rail, and green space, Salt Lake City is trying to figure out how to best use the room it already has. It started with a plan that was too big for its time. The pioneers who laid out those 660-foot blocks were designing for a future they believed would bring tens of thousands of believers to the valley. That future did not arrive in the form they imagined, but the space they created remains. These days, the challenge is how to fill that space in a way that respects both the scale of the grid and the human need for intimacy. The green loop represents one approach, using the excess width to create corridors of green that other cities cannot build. The ongoing residential boom represents another, filling the voids in the grid with enough density that walking between destinations becomes practical. What makes Salt Lake City the opposite of every other American city is the width of its streets. But it is also the fact that the city's biggest problem of too much space is the exact problem every other metro wishes it had. Boston would love to have room for protected bike lanes without removing parking. San Francisco would love to add light rail without tearing up entire neighborhoods. New York would love to triple its park space without spending billions on land acquisition. Salt Lake City has all of that capacity built in. Whether it can learn to use that capacity before the grid's scale becomes a permanent barrier to urban life is yet to be seen. Salt Lake City remains a geometric experiment that is still finding its soul. The grid that Brigham Young laid out in 1847 was designed for a world that never came to pass, but it created a physical reality that cannot be undone. Every street is a reminder that this city started with a plan that was too ambitious for its time. What that means today is that Salt Lake City is discovering advantages that were invisible for over a century. The massive streets are becoming the corridors where light rail, protected bike lanes, and linear parks can coexist without demolition. The rigid grid that seemed lifeless is revealing itself as a framework flexible enough to absorb multiple transformations. But the fundamental tension remains unresolved. Can a city built at the scale of wagons and oxen teams ever feel intimate enough for pedestrians? Can streets designed to keep 20,000 people spread across orderly blocks support the dense, spontaneous urban energy that twice that population will demand? The Green Loop and other commitments like it are bets that the answer is yes, that narrowing lanes and adding trees can transform the grid without destroying what makes it unique. While other American cities are locked in battles over every inch of right-of-way, fighting to carve out space for the infrastructure of the future, Salt Lake City is working through a different problem entirely. It has the space. It always had the space. The challenge now is learning how to use it before the advantages of abundance are lost to another century of indecision.